Serious Redditors who witnessed a murder, what is your story? Redditor 1, saw my friend get shot in the head and died a few minutes later during a crossfire between her oldest brother and the police. Was very heartbreaking. I still miss her 22 years later. We were playing on a field next to her house and her brother was watching us. He pulled a gun out, started shooting as soon as he saw the police. I didn't think this would get a lot of attention. Thank you for all the awards and all the happy cake days, for the ones who posted on here. For some reason I cannot see them on the post. But, thank you. Sorry if I have not replied to everyone. Redditor 2, used to work at a movie theater. I would change the sign near the road in the middle of the night. I saw a taxi pull up to the bus stop. It stayed there for quite some time. That's what caught my attention was how long it was there for. Saw a dude get out and quickly walk away. A week later I was changing the sign again and I hear a voice below asking me to come down. After he showed me his badge I obliged and he asked if I had seen anything weird the week before. I replied only that a taxi had sat there for a while and a guy got out. I had to then go look at lots of mugshots. Turns out I was the sole witness to some poor bastard's murder without even realizing it. Wish I had a better look at the guy so I could get him some justice. Redditor 3, when I was 6 my family went to see Sesame Street on Ice downtown. When we were leaving a little girl my age was struck by a van and drug across the parking lot. I remember the mother jumping on the windshield screaming at the driver while the van was still moving. My mom was a nurse and was helping until the ambulance arrived but she was already dead. I can still remember the screams and lifeless body of that little girl. This was over 30 years ago. Redditor 4, I saw a few in Mexico. The most memorable one was the first one I saw while I lived there. I was cleaning out a house with some buddies of mine. A guy was walking down the block. We heard gunshots. I looked out the window and there was that same guy laying out on the sidewalk. A black pickup truck sped by. I think there were 4 guys on back. All with bandanas covering their faces, all with guns in their hands. The thing that stuck with me is they all looked younger than me. I was 22 at the time. According to the paper that was released right after he was from out of town and likely they mistook him as someone else, he was 17. His blood was left on the streets for days. One of my friends said he heard 14 shots but I only heard 6. I have the whole experience written down as it was so foreign to me. This was in Altamirano. I used to stay up late at night trying to think of what kind of life would lead those guys to do a drive-by like that. I also wonder about that 17-year-old. I'm sure he had family visiting there. Redditor 5, was at a bar, couple guys got into an argument. The whole thing subsides, then a few hours later one of them leaves. As the guy is leaving, the other guy he was arguing with earlier runs outside and punches him in the back of the head killing him instantly. Only other time I've seen someone die was on the highway, not murder here. Guy jumped off a bridge I was driving under, had a rope tied off and hanged himself. Got smashed by a truck before he died though, caused a really big mess. Heck, maybe the rope broke his neck before getting plowed into. Ike. Redditor 6, saw my neighbor murdered in cold blood in my own driveway. My neighbor was helping his lady friend escape a very abusive relationship. Lady's ex hunted her down like a dog. Saw my neighbor walking back home with her after they went to get food for his kids. Heard 3 loud pops. I ran outside to find her screaming and him blown out of his shoes and into my driveway. He had a hole in his chest big enough to put my fist in. There was nothing I could do to save him except sit with him and hold his hand while I prayed for him to pass quickly. I'll never forget that night. 48 hours later I broke the lease on my house and moved in with my boyfriend who lives in a much safer borough. You were an awesome neighbor and a wonderful father, Kane. You're certainly missed. Edit for those wanting news articles. McKeesport shooting police chase. Edit 2 yes I get it. I misspelled his name. It was an accident. We all aren't perfect. Redditor 7, was going to work one day when a van hit a cyclist. Saw the person fly through the air looked like a mannequin. I kept talking to the body, but, with blood coming from his ears, I knew he was dead. Unfortunately they never released the name of the victim. I would have liked to have visited the grave. Some of the other witnesses were messed up, but I was, and still am, okay with it. I read that one's hearing is the last thing to go. If I am ever in that bad situation again, I will talk more conversationally. Redditor 8, at a pub about 2 years ago. Large group out the front arguing, then a guy got blindsided and punched in the side of the head. The guy that hit him sprinted off into the darkness. The guy went down and never got up. His wife watched it happen and was trying to get him to wake up while the fighting and arguing continued. 30 minutes go by and the guy hasn't moved since being punched. Bar staff have been doing CPR on him for about 15 minutes before emergency services finally arrive and continue. Turns out he was brain dead on impact. They kept him alive somehow until the morning but turned life support off the following afternoon. The guy was 46, at his local bar and got killed. Heaps shit thing to see, they'll never forget that night. The guy that hit him was 19, got charged with murder and is in jail as we speak. Edit. Some people are wondering why he got charged with murder and not manslaughter. In Australia we have a thing called coward punch laws. Basically if you blindside someone or king hit them you get charged with murder, 8 years minimum. Personally, I believe he deserved a murder charge. Watching that man go limp and hit the ground and the attacker running away was one of the most sickening things I've ever seen. He came up behind him and punched the guy above his ear. He had no idea it was coming. Pretty much instantly made him brain dead, in front of his wife. No sympathy for the attacker here. Redditor 9, was walking home one day and saw a couple arguing. The dude started walking off away from the girlfriend's car, and apparently she was not happy with that. She proceeded to get in the car and wait about 5 minutes till he was way off down the sidewalk. I was walking on the opposite side of the road as him and all of a sudden I see a blur and he goes flying like a rocket. She must have been going at least 60 miles per hour. He flew through the air and hit a tree. Died instantly. The women then screamed out the window at his body and drives away. There was blood smeared all over the crumpled hood and I'll never forget the sight of his contorted body at the base of the tree. Almost folded in half. I had to talk to the police and within the hour they caught her at a car wash, trying to clean the blood and chunks off the hood and grille of her car. I was 16 at the time. For those of you concerned, thank you. I actually did have to see a therapist for a few months after. I am doing very well right now. However, I don't think I'll ever fully get over it. It's one of those things that always sticks with you. Redditor 10, obviously a lot of led up to the story but I'm not going there. My girlfriend was taking her dog for a walk while I got showered for work. I'm in the bathroom when I hear voices coming from outside. I look out the window and to my horror there is my girlfriend talking to her abusive stepfather who is standing about 5 away from her. I couldn't hear what they were saying but I knew it wasn't good. Stepfather raises his shotgun, shoots my girlfriend in the face then shoves shotgun under his chin and pulls the trigger. Murder-suicide. Life's never been the same for me since. Lots of messages so I wanted to say this. Thank you all for the support. It was 20 years ago and though I'll never get over it I can live with it. It took nearly 2 years before I came to realize there was nothing I could have done to stop it. I will never forgive her family for knowing what that man was doing to her and they did nothing about it. I'm not really good with words but I wanted to thank everyone for the kindness and support. Redditor 11, worked at a skating rink in the late 80s early 90s. I was in my late teens. It was Sunday Soul Night session. Very crowded. About 600 that night. As we were trying to clear the parking lot after closing, gunfire erupted between two gangs. Everybody hit the deck while the shootout happened. A 12-year-old girl panicked while coming from inside and started running. She ran into the crossfire and took one to the head about 6 feet away from me. Killed instantly. Here Skatehaven Murders is the article about the rink itself being a magnet for problems. I've seen people die in combat since but being a little girl is what haunts me about that one. Edit. Full article 3 Hech 7 Hupk 1 Ziggy 70. Redditor 12. I was around 8-9 years old and we were in a vacation village. While we were doing checkout with my family my father was at the desk while we were waiting at the lobby couches. An argument broke out between two guys who were at the lobby bar. I actually don't know what it was about, because it was in another language. One of the guys grabbed a bottle, smashed it and attacked the other one, hit him in the neck. That guy fell on the floor, and there were blood all over the place. My mother closed my eyes after that, and took us out while other people get involved. Years later I've learned that guy lost his life. Redditor 13, in the parking lot of a strip mall in Washington state, a guy walked into a jewelry store and did an armed robbery. Plainclothes security guard waited until the robber exited and shot the robber in the back. I was in a car and I didn't hear the shot, but I did see him fall and some shoppers gathering around his body. We drove by slowly to see if help was needed. When I saw how fast the pool of blood was spreading, I pretty much knew he would not survive. Redditor 14, when I was 10, my uncle murdered my mom's boyfriend at our house. It wasn't in the house, but he chased him through our house and killed him outside in front of the house. It really destroyed a part of our family as well as relationship between my mom and grandmother. It was 30 years ago and I am only one alive besides my uncle that was there that night. I wanted to thank everyone for the kind words and the questions. Kinda therapeutic to talk about. Redditor 15, pop pop pop. Fireworks on Halloween? That's weird, but whatever. Pop pop pop. Oh. It's someone dead in a car. I should call 911. For me, the surprising thing was just how anticlimactic the experience was. It was just surreal. I don't know if they ever caught the guy, but it was a drug-related murder. The murderer was in the car with him, so it was probably someone the victim trusted. Redditor 16, I was 16 driving down the highway in the passenger seat of my mom's car about 3:30 p.m. Traffic came to a complete halt and we were in the right-hand lane. So as we're creeping along, a semi-truck appears on the shoulder of the highway, door swung wide open. As we move past, there is a trail of blood down the doorstep onto the concrete and then leading about 20 feet further down the road. As we crept further, the trail of blood ended with a man lying face up, completely covered in blood. There were no police or ambulances there yet. This was on a highway in the suburbs of a major metropolitan area in the US, so plenty of people saw before the scene was taken hold of by emergency services. Turns out the truck driver had a partner with him. They got into an argument and the passenger stabbed the driver like a dozen times and then escaped. The murderer was caught about an hour and a half away, one state over, 2 days later. I have to imagine that I was about 5 minutes behind the truck pulling over because the police can be in that spot in about 30 seconds. Being in the passenger seat in the right lane of the highway, I was about 10 feet from the body. Haunting image. Redditor 17, I was in the military. We were at training camp and doing rappel training. We had a recruit 18 years old that was next in line. He kept saying stuff like, "Drill sergeant, my equipment is malfunctioning, drill sergeant." And "Drill sergeant, I need help with my equipment, drill sergeant." Of course, the drill sergeant thought he was just being a stupid recruit. After saying a bunch of funny, hateful stuff to the kid that made everyone want to laugh, he said, "You have 3 seconds to rappel, recruit," and started counting. At that point, you could see the fear in the kid's eyes, and we started to realize that he was very serious. When the drill sergeant finished counting, he put his hand on the recruit's chest, pushed him, and the kid fell 60 foot, straight backwards, landing flat on his back. The sound that came out of this kid when he hit the ground, the gurgling, all of it. I'll never forget it. I was later in the first sergeant's waiting room, and our captain was in the office with him. I could overhear the phone conversation with the parents. They assured them, "We did everything we could, but insert name of recruit here did not ensure their equipment was properly secured, and suffered a malfunction due to his oversight, and that they were in the hospital in critical condition. He died before the end of the night." 2 years later, multiple high-ranking military personnel and NCOs were investigated for similar incidents at that facility. However, I don't know if that instructor ever got in any trouble or if the family has received any closure. Edit. To the people who know this story is fake because I said training camp instead of boot camp, you're a special kind of stupid. Like I give 2 ducks about your little made-up words and abbreviations. Maybe I don't remember every little detail because this was 13 ducking years ago. I was in the ARNG and honorably discharged after an accident, and my entire existence isn't validated through that which was my military career. Some people have more important things to worry about than your stupid little Boy Scout titles. Take your butthurt ass somewhere else and move along. Not to mention, those of you sending me hateful PMs telling me to die and duck off. This shows everyone else, with half a brain, how deep-rooted this shit really is. It only further validates what I am saying. Lastly, all negative, or dumb, comments will be reported and blocked. This is not due to karma whoring. It is because all issues have already been addressed multiple times. With that said, I like to engage with people and address their concerns. So, in doing that, I do not have the time, nor the patience, to address trolls every 5 seconds. Edit X2, a Redditor who is still in the service reached out to me last night and helped me obtain some info. It was 2010, not 2009. Also, they reached out to a contact to forward my story to them, as well as the names of my old DSs, First Sergeant, and Captain, in order to find more info on if the DS in question is still active retired, or if they were ever reprimanded in any way. Also, a way to obtain a copy of my discharge papers, since I was told that if your copy is lost, damaged, stolen, you can't get another one. Just wanted to give an update. Redditor 18, I've posted this as a comment on another Ask Reddit before, so copy paste. Also, this was technically a homicide, but was ruled as self-defense. To add, I was 13 yoff. My then 18-yo brother and his then 18-yo wife lived next door to a family with a teenage son. She started an affair with that 17-yo son. One day, the son barged into my brother's place and started attacking him. I don't know exactly why, but the wife didn't seem to want to move away with my brother to the army, or some dumb shit. My brother was packing and moving BC, he was leaving for the army. He had pulled down a metal pole in a closet to make room for boxes. My brother grabbed that pole and used it to fight off the teen. The kid ran out bleeding. My brother called my dad. We lived a few blocks down the street and my dad jumped into action. He grabbed one of his hunting shotguns and some bird ammo. He ran out the door to the car screaming for us to call 911. My mom and I ran after him. BC, we were clueless and wanted to see where he was headed. My mom was on the phone with the cop and they were dispatching the one cop that we had in our town. We start running down the road to my brother's place. BC, we saw dad pull in. As we get near, we hear a gunshot and see my dad and brother taking cover behind the car doors that open to climb in and leave. Another shot goes off and we can see it isn't my dad firing. The teen had run home next door and was bleeding and told his dad my brother was trying to kill him. His dad grabbed his handgun and saw my dad and brother leaving and started shooting. That's the gunfire mom and I heard. Dumbass kept running towards my dad's car. I saw my dad position his shotgun in the car window and fire one round. Then, he and my brother climbed in the car and started driving back at us home. We all finally get together and dad says he shot the man in the stomach. Chaos breaks out on our street. Ambulance, cops, and people. They take the other dad away to the hospital and my dad into custody. Within hours, we find out that the man has died. The birdshot hit his liver and he bled out. Turns out he was an alcoholic and his liver was not going to survive the trauma. My dad was charged with murder and we started receiving death threats. In the cover of night, we are moved. We hid for days until my dad was bonded out. Ended up moving far away. Grand jury was convened and I had to testify to what I saw. After all the evidence and testimony was presented, my father wasn't charged. BC, the grand jury decided it was self-defense. We never talk about what happened or anything. Things carry on as normal. That day is forever burned into my memory. I want to add this, my dad never recovered from taking a man's life, even though it wasn't intentional. He ended up hooked on heroin after the church couldn't save him. We lost him to his demons in 2008. My brother has done well for himself, but he had his own battles that he fights daily. I am not pro or anti-gun. I just wish this had never happened. BC, so many lives were changed. My brother divorced her after he left for the army. She is gone from our lives. Forever. Also, added, I've tried to answer all the questions I can and added details to my op. Redditor 19, a drunk man was pushed down some stairs by the bouncer. Unfortunately, the drunk man was unable to catch himself and instead spun around and landed on the pavement with the back of his head making first contact. He was aloof for a little while but quickly succumbed to his wound and arrested on the pavement. He was declared dead 15 minutes later in Ed after being transported by ambulance. There was no CCTV or clear evidence of malicious intent that would hold up in court, and the man was known as a drunk and had no friends or family. It was ruled an accidental death. I had to walk past that spot most days going to work and will never forget his face, the look of mystified horror followed by the glassy-eyed slack-jawed expression that come with death. I was the medic that transported the man. I was by his side from start till the declaration. One of the most visceral experiences of my career thus far. Redditor 20, when I was a kid I witnessed a hit and run. An SUV ran into a pedestrian and sped away. I don't think they ever caught the person. The poor girl they hit flew into the air, the SUV passed underneath her, she landed on the road and she died. It was heartbreaking. She couldn't have been over 25 years old. Granted this wasn't murder, but I just couldn't believe there was a person there 1 second and then gone the next. It always made me wonder how people could live with themselves after doing that. Then I'd wonder how many people I knew would do the same thing. Eventually I wondered if I was capable of doing something like that too. All it's made me realize is hypotheticals are dumb because we really never are who we think we are. I also appreciate every year I get older. Redditor 21, I was riding my bike to work when I witnessed this attack. Agira sentenced 20 years attempted murder. I was the first person to approach and I was sure this woman was going to die. I heard the truck before I looked, and I watched as she was run over completely with the truck. I watched as both sets of tires ran her over. It was and is the most horrible thing I have witnessed in my life. I was probably 100 plus 150 foot away, and as soon as he pulled away I had to have an internal argument with myself about approaching. Like I didn't want to see a dead mangled person up close, but if there was any chance she was still alive I didn't want her to be alone. It was probably only a few seconds, but it felt like forever and then I went over. She was alive, and conscious. I tried to comfort her and started calling 911, but she only spoke Spanish so I wasn't able to really communicate with her. Another woman had seen as well and she came running over from across the street. She was able to come over and talk with her in Spanish while I called 911. I think she was able to help her call some family since I think we were all uncertain if the woman would live. The ambulance showed up pretty quickly and stabilized her. After she was taken away I went to work, and tried not to think about it. I actually actively avoided learning anything about the story until now, because the uncertainty of whether she died or not allowed me to believe she was okay. I didn't want to know if she died. This post actually prompted me to look up whether she lived or not, and this is the first time I've even tried to look up anything about that day. I'm happy she made it, and I hope she's doing well. Seeing someone try to kill someone changes you. I don't think about that day every day, but it definitely haunts me. Redditor 22, was working in the off-campus residences at my university. Over Christmas break when most of the students had gone home, I was still there keeping an eye on the place. I was in my little office that was in one of the apartment blocks, when I heard a pop. 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 Noise. It really just sounded like some kids were letting off some small fireworks in the stairwell or something. I looked out of my office window, which was just outside of the bottom of the stairwell, facing south to see if I could see what was up. As I looked out, 3-4 dudes come running down the stairs and take off running to the east toward the complex entrance. About 10 seconds later, another dude comes down the stairs and slowly walks off toward the southwest. I went outside to check and see if what damage had been caused by the fireworks, and went up the stairwell. As I got to the top, there was no fireworks debris or smoke or anything, but I saw a cell phone lying on the ground, and a single small hole in the wall outside the door of one of the units. At the other end of the corridor there was another stairwell, and at the bottom of that there was an old beater car just idling with the headlights on and a few of the doors just hanging open. Something was definitely fishy about it. I definitely had the what if those were gunshots? thought, but there was no gunpowder smell or blood or anything besides that one little hole. To play it safe, I called the cops who said they were sending someone over. The station is very close to the housing complex and they were there in less than a minute. I gave them a quick summary of what I saw, and they split up to go in the directions I told them that the people had headed. Was less than 30 seconds later that they found the lone guy that had gone off to the southwest. Turns out he had been shot multiple times, and had managed to walk across the parking area and turn behind a building before collapsing on the grass. They tried CPR, but when the ambulance arrived, the paramedics pronounced him dead on the scene. The other cops who had gone east did find the other guy and arrested them. I ended up having to go testify in court during the trial of the guy that was supposedly the shooter. I told them basically what I wrote up here, but didn't know any of the people involved and never saw faces or anything of any real help to the police. I think I was basically there to establish timeline or something like that. Anyhow, I heard that it was basically a drug deal gone wrong. Two different gangs from two different counties thought the residence apartments would be empty over the holidays and set up a deal. One party tried to rip off the other party and someone got shot. As I understand it, the shooter guy got sent to prison. Redditor 23, this was when I was in 2nd or 3rd grade, so late 80s. My friend's mom had picked us up from school in her station wagon and I was in the way back. There were probably 6 or 7 of us kids in the car and we were stopped at a traffic light across from a homeless shelter, about to get onto the interstate. This guy is walking down the street with an armful of chewing tobacco and drops a pack. A homeless guy leaning up against the wall picked it up. There was an angry exchange in which the guy refused to give back the tobacco, so the other guy kicked him and stomped him to death on the sidewalk. Redditor 24, 5 years ago. There was an attempted home invasion at my house when I was 18. I was downstairs watching Top Gear when I hear somebody trying to break in the door. My father, military type, very protective, confronted the guy and the guy turned around and shot my dad in the chest with a sawed-off shotgun. My dad was able to fire off a couple shots afterwards, killing him. But my father already was on the ground dead. This is the very short version. First time writing this out. Still surreal to think about. Turned out the guy was a felon with 6 butcher knives down his pants. Presumably trying to find some reason to hurt someone. I consider my father a hero. Most people considered his actions stupid or irresponsible, local internet commenters, but you had to know him to understand his mentality. If you want the full detailed story in my recovery, or if you're struggling with PTSD, PM me. Edit, I was 5 feet behind my father the whole time. Will never forget holding my father in my arms, holding his gunshot wound. Thank you everyone for such kind words, really makes me think. Thank you so much. Redditor 25, I was at the grand opening of a sports bar the night that Manny Pacquiao fought Chris Algieri. The bar was jam-packed beyond belief, so packed that you couldn't get back to your table without shimmying through the other patrons, trying not to put your butt on the back of their necks. Anyway, a guy who had paid, entered and had some drinks, went outside to take a smoke break. No smoking allowed in the bar. There was still an incredibly long line to get inside, so he tried to come back in the exit door. The bouncer told him he couldn't and that he would have to wait in line and come back in the main entrance, though he didn't have to pay again. The guy was pissed and tried to push past the bouncer. The bouncer eventually pushed him out the door and locked it. The guy then apparently went back home, grabbed his girlfriend's gun and came back to the bar. I learned this after the fact, talking to the owner and via news coverage. He waited until someone left out the exit door, snuck inside and shot the bouncer in the back of the head several times. The bar was so packed that chaos ensued. Almost everyone hit the floor immediately. There were tables, food, drinks, keys, phones and people all laying on the floor. Other people ran outside. My buddies and I waited for a few minutes until we knew the coast was clear and then got the heck out of there. At the time, we didn't know all of what had happened. As we exited the bar, we literally had to step over the dead bouncer to get to the door. I was lucky enough to find my phone and keys amid the melee. One of my buddies found his keys but not his phone. He never got it back. Sadly, that sports bar never really recovered from that incident. It closed down for about a month before reopening. But it never achieved the popularity that it should have due to that incident. Redditor 26, happened while hanging out at my bestie's house. For context, I'd like to explain that. 1. Her house faced the side of a popular bar in our town. 2. That particular night her husband was pretty buzzed and had the fire pit out front blazing. And 3. They had taken in my guinea pigs in addition to theirs when I moved to a place that wouldn't allow them. So my BF at the time and I at one point go to the basement to give out treats to the piggies. Through the open side door we could hear some commotion going on outside. Didn't think much of it at first, until I realized that my inebriated could possibly be involved. BF and I run out the side door to find the husband nowhere in sight, and the commotion is coming from two guys across the street from the bar and one guy in the parking lot arguing. We go back into the basement where we found the husband. He had went inside to grab a beer and then came down the basement steps to gather more cardboard to burn while the fire pit was going, and the three of us begin to chat. Fast forward a few minutes and we all hear pop 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 pop. For a split second we all just look at each other wide-eyed, knowing those pops were unquestionably gunshots. The three of us run out the side door again just in time to see one of the guys from across the street is now in the bar parking lot, and the other guy involved in the argument shoots him 5 more times. The victim goes down and the shooter stood over him and shot him 3 more times before taking off running up my bestie's street. Probably the worst part was that the victim's mom was inside the bar. Her cries were so heartbreaking to hear. Later learned that the victim lived across the street from the bar and his 2 young children ended up seeing their dad bleed out through the window. The killer was found within the hour and stated the argument was over $20 and a woman they were both trying to date. He was charged with first-degree murder and 13 counts of wanton endangerment. Redditor 27. So, I live in a country where it's pretty normal for public buses to steal each other's route schedule whatever. When I was 8, I was in one of them buses. I guess my driver was the one acting wrongfully. Along comes another bus. This is early in the morning, both buses are full, I was going to school 2nd grade. The driver of the other bus stops my bus, both drivers get off to yell at each other. The second driver has a gun but he is older, more feeble, so my driver grabs the gun and shoots him once. I saw everything as I was sitting by a window. When the body falls and I see the red stain, the world goes quiet for me. The last thing I heard was the soft gunshot, .22 caliber maybe. I get off the bus and walk to school, 25 blocks away. I don't remember a single thing about it. When I got to school I was pale and wouldn't react when spoken to. Eventually, I came to and was able to speak normally and matter-of-factly. Can't stand the noise of fireworks since. Fun fact, my now husband was in the other bus and also witnessed everything. Redditor 28. A couple of years ago when I was still in college, I was coming back to my dorm room at night when I heard 2-3 loud pops and someone screaming in pain. I went up to my room and out the window saw a handful of cops blocking off the street around the corner from my building. Turns out the campus police received an anonymous tip that a man was armed outside the dorm down the street from mine. When they arrived, the man took out a knife and charged one of the officers. He ignored the officer's warnings, so the officer ended up shooting him. They took him to the hospital but he died on the way there. It was later found out that the anonymous tip actually came from the man, who was actually a student. It was declared a suicide by police, I think that's what it's called. So technically not murder, but it led to some pretty terrible events in the week that followed, before the official report came out. Edit, it was pointed out I misremembered and the person went by they them. Felt I should correct that in respect to them. Redditor 29, I had the opportunity to support NATO activities within Kosovo. There was an internal struggle going on and I was given specific instructions not to interfere with local life, and not to deploy a weapon unless fired on. We weren't supposed to allow our presence to be noticed. The team I was assigned hooked up with NATO people and we were being escorted to the location they wanted us. En route, we went through a market and there was a solider with gun who was yelling at this woman and child. I don't know what was being said, I don't speak the language. The solider opened fired and killed the woman, the child, and a few others. We took cover and waited for him to leave. I was told he was KLA and the KLA were ethnic cleansing Serbians. Within days the US Navy was launching Tomahawk strikes at the area. Redditor 30. The first day I moved to the town I grew up in 3 years old, I went to Burger King and saw 2 men get into an argument while I was in line having to do with a gang rivalry I believe, and it escalated to the point where one of the men pulled out a gun, and within another minute or two it had been fired off and the other guy was on the ground bleeding out. My mom told me to look away, but that's the most impactful few peeks I've ever snuck, And those few images will always stick with me. Redditor 31 was in an Islamic State suicide attack. 78 fatalities, 500 wounded. The screaming is something that will be with me forever. Redditor 32, while driving for work, I went down a back road to reach a remote oilfield location. While driving and I seen a vehicle parked on the side with a vehicle just pulling away, didn't really think anything of it. After finishing my job and leaving, I seen the vehicle was still parked on the side and running, but no one was in the driver's seat. Thought it was kind of weird, and it was also 30 out that day, so I stopped to see what was up. Found the poor fella bound and gagged in the back seat with a gunshot wound to the head. Redditor 33, I live in Syria and I've been forced to leave my house due to ISIS attacks on our city. My family and I lived for 2 days under light artillery between ISIS soldiers and regime-affiliated troops that lived in the neighborhood. As I looked through the window, I saw an ISIS soldier running with a rocket launcher screaming. Then there was a hole in the building in front of him and the 3 men inside were blown to pieces. He quickly got shot in the chest and laid on the ground, dead. Oddly enough, and lucky for me, this incident didn't make a permanent damage on my well-being. I speak of it with the family sometimes to remember how we miraculously managed to survive. Redditor 34, as a child, I saw a beheading. As a child, I also saw a man shoot a bazooka at a bus full of people. Think Southeast Asia and how overloaded the buses there are. Direct hit. Redditor 35, which story would you like to hear? I have several. My neighbor apparently was mixed up with the cartels. I grew up in NM. They evidently ran foul of them. One night 5 people surrounded their trailer and opened fire. This was about 3 a.m. I was sleeping. I rolled out of my bed and hit the floor. We were at a club for teenagers one night when I was 15. An acquaintance of mine was hitting on this girl in the parking lot. Said girl was the GF of a gangbanger. Said gangbanger pulled out a .25 and shot dude in the face for hitting on his GF. I was walking home from a movie one day. I hear a screech like tires skidding. I look over and there was a head-on collision. Dude flew through the windshield. Died instantly. The other driver was arrested and charged for driving drunk, causing a death. Sadly I have more, but I gotta go to work. Redditor 36, when my dad first moved to North Hollywood in the 80s, he woke up one morning to some guy getting beaten by 3 guys, one with a baseball bat, across the street from his apartment. Police were called, but the kid ended up dying on the scene and my dad watched it all from his bedroom window. I don't remember if he ever learned any more details. Welcome to the neighborhood. Redditor 37, I didn't actually witness the murder-suicide, but I saw the direct aftermath seconds later. I was 6 years old at my babysitter's house after school. The husband came home drunk and demanded he speak with her in the backyard. A little bit afterwards their dog is freaking out demanding it come inside. I went out back and the dog lead me to them. The husband shot my babysitter and then himself. She was gone, but he still had labored breathing before dying in front of me. It's still one of my most vivid memories 21 years later. Redditor 38, I was in Terminal 2 in Barcelona Airport the morning of March 24, 2015. There were only 3 flights leaving the terminal, and we were all delayed due to fog. 150 people boarded Germanwings Flight 9525, 30 minutes before we boarded our flight. Although I didn't see it happen, we were the last people to see them alive. The first officer crashed the plane into the French Alps, killing himself and murdering the other 149 people on board. It will haunt me for the rest of my life. Redditor 39, I saw my cousin murdered when I was a kid. We were back in my hometown. He was sitting in his car in front of my aunt's house and he was gunned down. I was on the porch with his siblings. It was random, but he didn't live the most righteous life, so we honestly never know the motive and they never found out who did it. Redditor 40, Southern France Corsica in the late 1990s. I was in a bar with my girlfriend at the time having a drink. We were inside, but there were also tables outside in the narrow medieval alley. Suddenly, 2 gunshots ring out. Unlike elsewhere in Europe, guns are not that unusual in Corsica, so people take cover and dive under tables, music stops and such, but there is no huge drama. People are kind of used to this kind of stuff. I look at the barman, he shrugs. I head for the door to see what is going on and step out into the alley. In front of me lies a guy, no more than 20 years old. He is in fetal position, very peaceful looking, but he is clearly dead. His brains are all over the wall. All tables are empty, also in the restaurant across the alley. More and more people come out of the bar. We all look at the dead guy. There is a clear sense of let's get out of here. I find my girlfriend and we leave. Later we hear that the dead guy was a waiter. He intervened in an argument a customer had with his girlfriend. Told him to keep it down. Customer got up, pulled out a gun and shot the waiter in the head. I still sometimes think about how he lay there so still and peaceful. And it me realize how quick it can all end for you. Just like that.